Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. Thank you all for joining me today. I commend you because it's really difficult to make that start and get on your way to recovery from OCD and anxiety. So thank you all for joining me. As always, please remember to like the videos if you're finding my content helpful for you and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already because it's free. And hopefully we can build a bigger community where we can support each other in our healing journeys from OCD and anxiety. So on to today's video. What I want to talk about today is how we measure progress in our OCD and anxiety healing journeys. Because there can be lots of ups and downs along the way. Often as OCD and anxiety sufferers, we strive for those days where we're feeling peace and calm. And whilst those days are great and that is ultimately, what we want, it's not really a true measure of how well we're applying all the work in our therapy. And what I want to explain here is why we may be looking at the wrong indications for how well we're actually doing. Because whilst those things are great and peace and calm is wonderful, especially someone who's gone through a whole lifetime of suffering from OCD and anxiety, having those days where you feel like the intrusive thoughts aren't quite as loud and you're feeling more peaceful, you maybe not feeling as panicky on those days, and that's brilliant. But that isn't always a measure of how well we are implementing the work, because long term, because we often get up and down days with our OCD and anxiety. But what we really want to be aiming for is how well we are responding to those intrusive thoughts and how we are still moving forward in our life and facing that fear head on and not giving the attention to OCD and anxiety that it wants that from you. So that is a better way of measuring how well you are actually doing in your recovery journey. So while yes, having those days where you're feeling the peace and calm is great, but really we want to measure how well we are actually responding to those OCD intrusive thoughts, the sensations, the intrusive images that we get in our head, all those feelings we will feel, the anxiety, the fear, the shame, the guilt, how we are responding to that. Are we just waiting there for it to pass, or are we still moving forward, facing that head on and just thinking, no, you're not deserving of my time. I know what's happening here. This is trying to hook me in. It's trying to get me to answer its questions, to analyze and try and rationalize it and try and argue with it. But we don't give it the time of day it wants. We're not giving it center stage. We're just letting it be there in the background, carrying on. We're not ignoring it. We're just letting it be there. But we're still moving forward. We're still doing the day-to-day tasks we need to do. We're still, doing the things we love, even though that noise might be there sometimes, because it's unrealistic to think that recovery from OCD and anxiety is the absence of intrusive thoughts. It's the absence of feeling any kind of anxiety now and again, but once it goes into completely, you can't function anymore. I've been there many times when my daily life has been truly hard to live because it completely consumed me, OCD and anxiety. And I've lived many a day like that where I just, I did strive for those days where I could just feel some peace and calm, where, I just wanted it gone. But little did I realize that was actually keeping it going. Because the more I try and get rid of it, the more I try and, I just want it gone. I want it out of my life. The more I'm actually instructing my brain that this is important stuff. This needs to be held on to. And so it would come back and bounce back stronger, because this is what I'm communicating to my brain, that I'm scared of it. I'm not doing life. I am just on guard all the time, for that. It's that emergency mode. I'm in a state of constant emergency, waiting for the next intrusive thought, the next thing to trigger me. And my brain's fully aware of that. It's aware that that's what's happening, and I'm trying to get rid of this stuff. I'm trying to distract myself, or, push it out, push it away and stop it. I don't want to think about this, because we often do that in response to intrusive thoughts. We will go, oh, I really don't want to, I just can't, I need to get rid of this out of my head. I can't think about this. That is the complete wrong approach. And this is why how we react to our intrusive thoughts and urges to carry out a ritual is so important. We don't give it the attention it warrants from us. We don't do that. We just let it be there. And I know that is so hard. Believe me, because we do really have to take that leap of faith to the unknown, the uncertainty that's going to feel very uncomfortable. It's going to feel very scary at times to do that. But we're actually helping ourselves when we actually take that path, because our brain is constantly learning and rewiring that, we don't have to be in a state of emergency. When these intrusive thoughts pop up, we don't need to figure them out. We don't need to analyze. We don't need to argue with it. We can just let it be there, and it will fade out and dissolve on its own. And that's the beauty of this kind of approach to OCD. And it really did take me a long time to actually get where I am today, where I can get intrusive thoughts through the day, but I don't give them the attention. I don't give it the stage it wants. I let it be there for as long as it wants, and it fades. And, half an hour later, I'm like, oh, God, I'd forgotten about that already, because I don't give it what it wants from me. It wants me to take notice of it. It wants me to get involved with it. The least involvement as possible is always the best advice I would give you to intrusive thoughts. Anything, it goes to how we feel, those emotions we're feeling. We don't analyze them. The sensations in the body, we don't give it the time of day it wants. And if there's something really important that requires your attention, you will know the difference. We know deep down when OCD is just, playing those usual tricks on us, where it's trying to get our attention. And I've become very good at that. I know when OCD is trying to make me, fearful of something, trying to get me hooked into it. So I follow it down that rabbit hole to nowhere, because we're just going to be stuck and we're going to spiral, and things are just going to get bigger and stronger, and we're giving it more power. And that's why it often we feel so stuck with OCD and anxiety, because we're gripped. It's got us where it wants us. We're teaching our brain that, this is important stuff, and we need to hang on to it at all costs, because this is going to keep me safe. But in reality, it's actually just keeping us stuck and fearful, because we're not moving forward. So the important point is having all this stuff happen and moving forward anyway, and facing that fear head on, that uncertainty, that discomfort that we feel when we don't do what OCD wants us to do. When anxiety and OCD comes calling, we just do your thing and I'll do mine, because that's how we move forward. That's how we get better. And recovery isn't the absence of intrusive thoughts. People that don't have OCD get intrusive thoughts, but they respond to them differently. And that's why, as OCD sufferers, we struggle so much, because we give it a lot more of our attention. And I'm not putting fault on anyone for doing that, because I do believe biologically, genetically, we're different. The way we're wired, we can't rationalize things the same way, but we can retrain our brain and the way our brain operates to help ourselves to recover and actually heal. And we then, we will get those days where we're feeling peaceful and calm, because we're not giving OCD that attention that it wants from us. But it takes a lot of work. It takes being quite consistent with this and moving through those feelings of uncertainty and doubt, but not doing what OCD wants us to do. We're aware of it being there. We're not pushing it away. We're not trying to ignore it, because ignoring is sending a message to our brain that we're trying to distract ourselves. Distraction is not good. But moving forward, doing what we need to do in the company of it is what we need to be aiming for. We can be aware of it being there. Like I said, there's different ways of doing that, whether it's a toddler having a tantrum, we don't give it the attention it wants, or leaves in a stream that are floating through, but we don't pick the leaf up, or a telephone call that we don't answer. These are all just different ways to help you on that path to leaving those intrusive thoughts alone. The same with the rituals, sensations, images, anything, how it presents to you, the OCD and anxiety. So if we can consistently practice that, we will notice naturally the intrusive thoughts decreasing in frequency and volume. It's just naturally happen, because when our brain is learning that this is not worth our time or an attention, and it will disappear from our brain on its own. And that's the wonderful thing about this kind of therapy. It's the only thing that has worked for me. I'm going to be honest, I've tried everything over the years, every kind of therapy. CBT didn't work for me. Exposure and response prevention is an element of this, but cognitive behavioral therapy just didn't do what I needed. It fed into it, and it just, for me, made it bigger. I was giving it more attention, which therefore my brain is, again, it's thinking this is important. Whereas metacognitive therapy, which is different, which is doing as little as possible with it. And that is where the true healing really began for me. And it's been amazing, because I can really now pass this information on to you guys, hopefully, that will see this and really see that healing and recovery is possible for you. But we have to be realistic that, this, when we're striving to be completely anxiety free and completely intrusive thought free, it's just not going to happen, because they will happen. They will come up, things will be there, but you won't respond in the same way anymore. You might notice these things in your everyday life, some trigger that may have occurred, but you don't respond to it in the same way. And that is where true healing is, because we're not giving it the attention it wants. We're moving forward with our day, doing what we need to do, doing things we love. And our brain knows that this is not worth hanging on to, and it will move from your brain, because that's the thing, we hold on to so much. It's so exhausting and draining, because it's just constant going round and round and spiraling, because we're feeding into it. We're feeding into what it wants, and we're trying to analyze it and answer it and question everything, argue with it, just problem solve. But that is really just keeping us stuck. That is not helpful in the long run. We're not going to recover by doing that. It's just going to be waning, on and off. We'll have those good days, but then we'll have a bad day. But this is a more consistent approach to actually being on that path to healing, because by doing all of this, we are going to get our lives back. We're not going to be answering to OCD and anxiety all day long, because we don't need to. It can do its thing, but we're going to still move forward and find our path to freedom. So I really hope this has explained things a little better about recovery and what it truly means and what we need to do to get there. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.